Welcome everybody here to the Joukowsky Forum, and we are very excited to have you all here for our event on responding to the global refugee crisis at home and abroad. My name is Adam Levine. I'm an associate professor of emergency medicine here at Brown University and director of the Humanitarian Innovation Initiative, which is sponsoring the event tonight. The Humanitarian Innovation Initiative, for those who haven't heard, has been based at the Watson Institute for the last 2 years. And our goal is really to bridge the gap between academia and the world of Brown University and the humanitarian world writ large. So we coordinate and work with a number of humanitarian organizations, UN agencies, and outside humanitarian practitioners to collaborate with them on projects that with the goal of improving humanitarian response, whether it be through research or training. We host a number of different events for students and faculty and staff throughout the year, and also have a number of ongoing research and training projects both here at Brown and around the world. But tonight we wanted to really kick off the new school year with an event that really reached out to students here at Brown who are really interested in thinking about what they can do to contribute to the global refugee crisis. You've been hearing about it in the news, you've been seeing it on TV and in the newspapers, and probably wondering a bit about what sort of impact you can potentially have as a student here. And so we organized this panel with two really wonderful people who have already a strong connection to Brown University and to our Humanitarian Innovation Initiative to give you a sense of what is going on with the global refugee crisis and how you can participate and be involved both here locally in Providence and also internationally. So I'm going to start by introducing each of our panelists in turn, and I'll give them a chance to speak to you for about 15 minutes each, and then we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. And that's going to be the really fun part where we get to hear all of your thoughts and ideas and have a really good and wide-ranging discussion. So I'm first very excited to introduce Sophia Kouvelaki, who is the executive director of the Home Project, an organization providing holistic support for refugee children based in Athens, Greece. Previously, she was program manager for the Bodhisaki Foundation program for unaccompanied minors, where she was in charge of social welfare provision for vulnerable groups. She's also worked with the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, in the Economic Analysis and Social Policy Division, and as an advisor and researcher for the public and private sector in Greece. She holds a Master's of Science in International Political Economy from the London School of Economics and a Master's in International Economics from Sciences Po Paris and a certificate from the Harvard Program on Refugee Trauma and Recovery. But most importantly, she's a Brown University alumna, receiving her Bachelor's of Arts in Economics and International Relations here in 2006. And she tells me that this is her first time back in 10 years to Brown University, so we're very excited to welcome her back and hear about the work that she's been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and it's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. After 10 years, it still feels like home, and part of our work is exactly that feeling of belonging, and I'm very grateful to the Brown community because it was the first experience of belonging somewhere where it's not your family, it's not your country of origin, but still feeling like home. So I'm very, very moved and very honored to be here. Now the Home Project. The Home Project is a relatively newly born initiative. We were founded 20 months ago after the EU-Turkey Agreement in March 2016. A year and a half after the big outbreak of the refugee crisis. Our mission is to provide support, protection, education, and social integration services to unaccompanied minors, to children that travel and arrive in Greece, in Europe, all alone. So let me give you a bit of background and why we started the Home Project. Now, after the EU-Turkey Agreement in March 2016 and the closure of the Greek borders with the EU, what happened was that the general number of refugee arrivals decreased. However, the numbers of children that that were arriving alone was and is still constantly increasing at an increasing rate. To give you an idea in terms of the numbers, since 2016, around 15,500 unaccompanied minors have been officially registered entering Greece. Now, of those, as we speak, around 2,700 are homeless, which means they're in the streets, in camps, in detention, suffering from all sorts of threats, from child prostitution to organ trafficking to child labor. They're coexisting with adults in horrific living conditions. And if a child is not placed in a shelter, in a home, she or he is not able to receive any kind of service nor any information on the rights. That's why we started the Home Project. And now, after 20 months of operation, we have created and are operating 11 homes for a total of 220 children. 2 out of the 11 shelters are for minor girls and minor mothers with their babies. So our youngest child at the moment is 3 months old. We actually have a pregnant minor mother too. 1 shelter is for toddlers aged 5 to 11, and the rest of the 8 shelters are for teenage boys aged 12 to 18. The majority of these kids are boys, 93% are boys, and the average age is around 14. But we have noticed that in the last months we have an increase in the percentage of younger kids. And an increase in the percentage of very vulnerable cases. So as you can understand, these kids are really the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. The worrying part is that there is an increase in their vulnerability. And that is caused because of the deterioration of the conditions in the countries of origin. The war in Syria, the situation in Afghanistan, in Congo, I mean, in many places in the world, but also because of the prolonged stay in dehumanizing conditions in camps in Turkey, but also in the Greek islands. I mean, I don't know if you saw the New York Times yesterday regarding the situation in Moria camp. Moria is what they call the hotspot in Lesbos Island, which is the entry point of Greece, of Europe. And really the situation there is worse than ever. And there are no excuses to do that because we no longer have 50,000 people coming every single day. We have around 60,000 refugees in Greece at the moment. So there's a huge paradox. We're not talking about an unmanageable number. However, as our colleagues on the field in Moria have said, the level of human suffering that they have experienced in Moria, they haven't experienced in the worst conflict zones. So right now, we have 10,000 people in a military camp with a sewage system that can only support 700. Out of the 10,000, 3,500 are children. Children are being raped and abused every single day. There are 300 unaccompanied minors, 50 of which are under the age of 14. So as you can understand, there is a big emergency and urgency to remove all of the population there, but mostly the kids, and urgently. So what we are trying to say is that if we manage to support 220 children, and there are 2,700 kids that are in need of a home right now, this is not an unsolvable problem. It's a manageable number. And there's, again, another paradox. If one compares the level of EU funding that is available and that problem that still remains and is increasing. Now, at the Home Project, we're implementing a model that is based on 3 pillars. The first is that we create and operate shelters, either as a Home Project or in collaboration with other local NGOs, because we we didn't want to disempower the existing civil society. On the contrary, we want to act as an umbrella that is not only going to fund existing NGOs, but also is going to provide capacity building for anyone that works with this specific target group. So in every shelter, we offer a holistic network of services that covers basic needs such as food, shelter, of course, material provision, medical support, mental health support, education, and job creation. The second element of our work is that 50% of our staff comes from the refugee and migrant community in order to be able to create jobs both for the kids that will become 18, but also for the community itself. And the other 50% is targeted to Greek youth that is also suffering from 47% of youth unemployment. Now, the third element is that we find buildings that have been unrented or abandoned for a long period of time. They're the victims of the Greek financial crisis. We renovate them, adding value to the real estate property, and we pay the property tax and the rent to the owners. So the idea really is to create a win-win situation for everyone, for the kids, for the refugees, but also for Greeks. And we really have to do that in order to be able to fight xenophobia, racism, and violent local reactions. What we give emphasis on is around community building. We really have to build a community around each shelter on a local level, on a national level, but also on an international level. For example, what we're doing here today, it's very important for us to be able to engage different stakeholders like the private sector, media, academic institutions, and really to create a bridge and a sense of a wider support around the kids that we are supporting. Now, in terms of our programs, right now our emphasis is on mental health and education. We are providing mental health not only for the kids that we're supporting, but also for our staff, because they have to be supported in order to be able to support. And another really transformative program that we are currently implementing is an educational program in collaboration with private schools in Athens. We call this program Youth to Youth, and it started with a collaboration with the American Community School in Athens, whereby our kids would go to the school campus every weekend. They would buddy up with a student from the school, and then they would receive English, Greek, math, art, music, and sports classes. So now we were very lucky because this year we got 18 full-time scholarships for middle school students to attend the American Community School. So a curriculum drafted based solely on their needs is being implemented. And really all this has transformed the community of our shelters because the kids are motivated to wake up, go to school, attend the weekend programs, and then hopefully reach the stage of a scholarship. We're solely funded by the private sector. The Libra Group is our founding sponsor. A few months ago, we got scaled up by the IKEA Foundation, and very recently we started being supported by also by the Shapiro Foundation. We are very grateful to our supporters and to our donors because they're really the ones that have enabled us in less than 20 months to move very fast from inception to setup and from setup to operations.
Great. And I think we have a video that you wanted to play. Is it possible to run it? I'll also say for those sitting in the back, we have some seats still up at the front if you'd like to come. No YouTube. All right, well, thank you so much, Sophia, for that presentation. So I'm very excited next to introduce Omar Bah. So Omar Bah is the founder and executive director of the Refugee Dream Center right here in Providence, Rhode Island. He has worked on refugee issues in the United States for the past 11 years. He himself is a survivor of torture, a former journalist, and a refugee from the Gambia, which is located in West Africa. Bah is also the author of the book Africa's Hell on Earth, The Ordeal of an African Journalist. I actually met him in 2015 when he was a co-recipient of the Rhode Islander of the Year Award from Rhode Island Monthly Magazine here. He represents the state of Rhode Island at the Refugee Congress of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Washington, D.C. He also holds a bachelor's degree in communication studies with a minor in political science from the University of Rhode Island, a master's degree in public administration from Roger Williams University, and a master's in counseling psychology and global mental health from William James College, where he's currently in the final year of a doctoral program on organization and leadership psychology. He completed the trauma treatment certification at the Harvard program in refugee trauma as well. Same as you.
We just realized.
That's the connection.
He has been a member of our global advisory board for the Humanitarian Innovation Initiative for 2 years now, and in that role helping advise our work here at Brown. And so I'm very excited to have him here on this panel to talk about the work that his Refugee Dream Center has been doing.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, and thanks, Sophia. So as you see, giggles for those who came late. She also did the same program at Harvard. So that's our connection. But I really want to thank you for, looking at the video, it's really profound work you're doing. And also the sense of belongingness that you are talking about. You know, currently even people from my own home country, Gambia, are big victims of this migration from Africa through the Mediterranean, and a lot of them ending up in Greece or in Lampedusa, Italy, or other places. So anything that happens, it's a really great effort that people are doing. But I'm happy that you started because you create a context of the refugee crisis globally, what is happening. And we are dealing with the spillovers. It's a very small number that end up in the United States or other parts of the world. So there are 22 million refugees currently registered by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Over 66 million are displaced, but 22 million are registered. Only 1% of that get resettled to third countries. So the numbers that Sophia has may be part of that 22 million, or probably even part of the 66 million that are not even registered. She's just struggling to help a fraction of that. So talking about the 1% that get resettled to the US is people like me who end up getting the opportunity to be supported to get the chance to a second life. So I came here 11 years ago from Gambia through Ghana, where I was living as a refugee. Luckily for me, I stayed for only 1 year in Ghana. But the typical journey of a refugee that is fleeing from violence, in most cases, we stay in camps for 10, 15 years, 20 years. And when we say camps, it is not really the luxury of, when people go to hiking here, it is like bare. People use their clothes, or women use their wrappers, or plastic bags to cover themselves at night. When the winds and flooding comes, it sweeps it away. You see, I'm African. A lot of us don't have alphabet, so we use our words. So the words go with the hands. So just excuse that. But just to illustrate the kind of suffering happening in the camps, and a lot of people benefit from the UNHCR, which is the UN agency that deals with refugees, but that is really very small numbers. If you Google, you see refugee camps, you'll see some of them have nice tents from UNHCR, but they are not many. So a lot of them end up in those kinds of tents for 10, 15 years. I work with some refugees, currently some youth who are like 17, 18, 19. They were born in camps. They don't even know their countries of origin. And that's the kind of situation. So those people are faced with three options. You either stay in a camp, or integrate with the local community of the country where you are, or go back home when the conflict is over, or eventually get resettled. And getting resettled to a third country is the hardest. As I stated, it's just 1%. And what used to be the case, the US used to take more refugees than any country in the world. That is different from the first places they are going to, like Kenya, Dadaab, or Greece, or Lampedusa, other places. But when they come into these camps and take people to third countries, the US used to take more people. It used to be about 100,000. In fact, when Obama was leaving, it was about 110,000. Then last year, the US took 53,000, down for almost half. And this year, which actually ended just, which is ending actually this September, 20,000 refugees, from 110 to 20,000. So a global leader in helping, just a small fraction, less than 1%, now is like playing catch up. So Canada takes more refugees now, I think probably Australia, Sweden, and other countries. So just to show that does not only affect the refugees who are out there, but also the people who are here, the people that we are working with. Because there is no single refugee who is in the US who does not have a family member, who was probably in a waiting list, or maybe expecting to be resettled, to be reunited with their family members. And that is causing huge levels of trauma among the refugee population. So coming back to Providence, I came here 11 years ago. I was a journalist, was investigating the president in Gambia, and was declared wanted. And I was a torture survivor before that. And when they declared me wanted and placed my pictures on TV, I thought, it is time for me to leave. If not, they would kill me this time around. Luckily, I escaped, ended up in Senegal in 2006, and I was moved to Ghana, which was through the help of organizations like us, and I ended up in Ghana just to give me some distance from Gambia. And I lived in a tent. Actually, mine was a little bit better because it was cardboards, which created some sort of more stronger cover. But if someone stamps on it, you can easily enter. So that was where I lived for 1 year. And luckily, the US Embassy expedited my case because I was being sought after still by the dictator. And within 1 year, I was resettled to the US. And before coming to the US, even with that kind of special attention and support, you go through so much processes. We call it this 12-step process. It's like AA, 12-step. You get interviewed by some agencies, and after that, the US Embassy helps you. Then you go through some medical checkup, and actually at that time, even if you have HIV that time, now it's changed, they'll reject you on medical grounds, and then you'll go tell your story at least 3 or 4 times. And if you make a mistake to miss even one date or any piece of fact, you are out. And then imagine in a compound where refugees are interviewed, I see people, hundreds of people rolling on the floor every day crying because they are rejected for one reason or the other. And finally, you then start facing the US agents, the Department of Homeland Security. They'll fly down to the camp and start interviewing you. And they will look at everything. They'll scan your eyes. They'll scan your fingerprints. They will look at your fingers, whether you've been a combatant. They will know. They have a way of knowing. They will ask you your movements, your relatives. You'll draw a family tree with them. And they will ask everything about you. And they will investigate. And this is why a lot of people fail, because if you have probably been in Turkey and you went to Jordan, and after at some time you went back to maybe Syria, and you cannot explain that trip, they can just conclude it's a security risk. You are not safe to come to their country. And they are not like the NGOs, like the Home Project, fighting for your rights or supporting you. They are just there for security reasons purely. So it's very difficult coming to the country. I just wanted to lay out that because coming to America through the refugee process is the hardest. People can get a US visa through tourism or students or other forms. But through refugee process is the hardest. And when refugees come in here, they are not depending on the system. Most refugees, I had food stamps and medical assistance for 19 days. I got a job at Rhode Island Housing and called them. They said, we don't usually get these kinds of calls, and dropped my financial assistance. And that is the typical refugee. We want to be self-sufficient, because the reality is you are here, your body is here, but your soul is back home. You were never ready. You were never prepared. You just want to be self-sufficient and get back your real self again. And once you arrive, you have a loan. I don't know other countries in Canada, Australia that resettle refugees, but once you arrive, you have a loan that is 0 interest though, but you will pay back. Immediately after 6 months of your arrival, you start receiving bills. And that is for your transport arrival, for your plane ticket. Imagine most refugee families are huge. They're like, average is 6, 7 people. Probably you'll see larger families. Imagine if you have 7 people in your family and the ticket is $1,500 from Kenya, because most of the time you fly from Kenya to Dubai, then here, it's like $1,500 the ticket. You're talking about a minimum $10,000 loan that you are entering this country with. So it's good to put out there, because some conservatives may not understand. Refugees don't use little in this country. They're just grateful that they're given the chance to a second life. And most do not know where they are going. They are just happy that they are coming to America. I work with somebody who's a case manager from Congo. She knew she was coming to Providence at the airport when she came to JFK. I knew I was coming to Rhode Island or Providence 1 day before my arrival in 2007. I remember asking a caseworker at IOM, International Organization for Migration, where am I going to? He said, you're going to Providence. I thought it's like a church group, like a church. I said, well, that's good. The religious institutions help people. It's like, is it a church? Church like Catholic, because we have Catholics in my country, a lot of Catholics. So he said, no, what's wrong with you? That's the capital city of Rhode Island. I said, okay. I had 2 names that I memorized at the US Embassy, Nate Bloom, who is retired and sending me pictures where he's hiking in Colorado somewhere all the time, and Monica Robertson. I said, but Nate and Monica Robertson told me that I'm going to America, not an island. So why are you taking me to an island? Because I was so paranoid, highly depressed. Didn't know about PTSD. Any little thing would startle me. I would run the other way. I was highly, highly distressed. So I almost gave up. I would almost walked out and just went back home, and rather than going to an island, because I wanted just to be safe. I was tired of hiding for the rest of my life. So the guy just couldn't handle that. He was just giggling and showed me the map of the US and thought, this is Rhode Island right here. So I noticed one thing right away is the smallest state. Ideally I'm from the smallest country on the mainland of Africa, Gambia. And coming to the smallest state apparently will make me feel at home very easily. And then coming back to the sense of belonging that you were talking about, I came to Rhode Island, didn't know anybody. No family, no friend, and I was the only Gambian refugee here. It's a very small country. You find some refugees in New York or Atlanta, the South, where it's warmer. But I was the only Gambian refugee. There was a lot of immigrants, but some of them lived in other parts of the state, like Woonsocket. So I was just struggling to belong, to have something to do. And my family, the caseworkers at the International Institute, now DOCAS, and the other refugees who are coming around the same time, that was my family, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, and everything, started learning how to speak the Liberian English, and a lot of Liberians were coming then. And then I also had a lot of Iraqi friends. They started coming, people from Bhutan and Nepal, so from all over the world. And I realized that I really have a lot of work to do, because a lot of people were trying to put me to the Providence Journal. Oh, you are a journalist, continue writing. Actually, I was scared of anything that had to do with journalism then. I was paranoid. I didn't just want trouble, because this is my last bastion of hope. If I had trouble here, I would probably end up in Mars or somewhere. There is no trouble here. Actually, even if I see police, I'll go the other direction. I just didn't want problem. So I avoided anything that had to do with journalism. But I was thinking, while working at Rhode Island Housing, I was doing a lot of volunteering, helping people at Rhode Island, at the Institute, and doing just volunteer work like you guys do at some of our volunteers at the Dream Center currently. So while doing that, they would take me to places. They say, Omar, share your story. Just tell them what refugees are. It became just my life. I said, okay, this is going to be my new form of journalism. I cannot be just going around helping people from the streets. I wanted to found a center so that it will be easy. It will be me with other people, because I ended up doing that volunteering, and then people will call me. I'm at work or I'm at school, and I have to fill forms. I have to translate. I have to do a lot of other stuff. And so 4 years ago, we ended up just starting the center, and then currently we have 6 staff who are doing case management. 4 of them are refugees and 2 non-refugees. And just like your model, because the idea was based out of refugees helping fellow refugees, and us acting as mirrors, so that they look up to us, that if they struggle and made it, then we can also do something. And When I came, I was able to read and write English. I could speak English. As a reporter, I could use all these Apple apps and using Apple. I could do everything. People thought I couldn't speak English because my accent was probably 10 times heavier than this. But I had no problem with English except the British and the conversion, the Z's and the Z's and boots and sneakers and all those. But I didn't have a problem. But it was still difficult just adjusting with the variations in English, the accent, and the cultures, having to do eye contact, going to places late. It was just difficult in everything. No one told me about PTSD. No one said anything about that. That's why I ended up very much interested in psychology and trauma, because I just don't want other people to go through that. So my point was, if I could go through that, 26 years then, young man, no problems. My wife was still in the Gambia. I was single. I had no problems. What about the average refugee, mostly farmers, mostly very low skills, who just have to translate everything, their skills, their culture? They're struggling to adjust in every facet of their life. And if you are familiar with the refugee process, settlement process in America in general, you are supported for literally 3 months to 6 months. 6 months is the average. You are on your own. And the money you get from the federal government is about $2,500 or $2,600 to help somebody for 6 months. And half of that goes to the resettlement agencies to help them with their case managers and other expenses. So you're talking about maybe $2,300 ending up with to help somebody for 6 months. So my point was, as an activist, I said, this is practically impossible. So what we're going to do, we will create a bridge program to continue the services after the federally assisted agencies, like in the institute that helped me. So that's why we call ourselves a post-resettlement agency. Once people finish 6 months later, then they continue with us. Doesn't mean we join DOCA sometimes to welcome people at the airport or help them in any way we can, but we are mostly focused between 6 months to 5 years, where people need to continue the services, to also fill gaps, but also to avoid an interruption on services. So we do very similar programs, like the main agencies that resettle refugees. We do case management that help people with jobs and housing, collecting donations and distributing. We also do youth mentoring, which is modeled out of very similar to the youth-to-youth program. You see the HPRT connection. So we bring about an average of 15 refugee youth and 15 American youth, put them together, and then the idea is they learn. They teach each other. They learn from each other. Because initially, I used to get a lot of kids from the high school. So the colleges, they donate their time by volunteering, which is amazing. But the high school kids, I didn't know what to do with them. They were bored in the English classes that you guys do. They just couldn't handle it. So I thought, I have a mentoring program, but it's only refugee youth that I'm mentoring. I'm going to bring them, not as mentors, because they're the same age, and I don't want that top-down model, because no matter what, the refugees have something to offer. They have something to give. So I made it a peer mentor program where they learn from each other. We match a refugee and an American. So the Americans can help them, their interaction to help them increase their self-esteem, their English language skills, but also understanding the American culture. But likewise, the refugees also teach them about their own culture, about global issues. You don't need to go to Afghanistan to know about the mountains there. You don't need to go to Congo to know about their food or the war or what is happening there. It's right here. And currently, some of the youth who come from local schools like Moses Brown, they organize an evening of advocacy, bringing hundreds of parents and teachers together. So that works. How are you? so come together to help, bring about just some sort of invite the refugee community into their own communities. So basically, that was why we created refugees and refugee youth and American youth to work together. Then we also have a health promotion program, which is mostly preventative health approach. A lot of refugees, well, we come from mostly the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia, or the world, global South, as we call it. And the culture's strikingly similar, very, very similar. I just finished reading a book, When the Spirit Catches You, You Fall. Very interesting. I was saying, well, this is similar to my own culture. Like, somebody having epilepsy, you think it is a spirit that's catching, and there's a battle between the doctors and others. So our cultures are all very similar. So meaning a refugee is very likely to not go to the hospital, to not see the doctor until things are very late, and they go to the emergency room, and then end up 10 hours there. or probably there's no interpreter to support them, or maybe a well-trained or qualified interpreter. So what we do with that program, we meet every Saturday, and then we take on one topic. So it could be diabetes, and we have different presenters coming to tell people about sometimes nutrition in general. In our culture, Middle East and Africa, for example, for the man, if the stomach is big, that's good. It's good living. You are happy to send a picture to the camp to show your family that America is nice, I'm having a good life here. But then that could be a danger towards, it could be a path towards diabetes. So we talk to them about the smoking. A lot of Syrian refugees that we work with pick up, especially the men, pick up these smoking habits. A lot of Congolese men pick up alcoholism. That could be explained because of the religious variations. You know, most Syrian men don't drink, so they will rather use cigarette. But those are problems because they smoke in their car, in the house, and just it becomes rampant, and a lot of money that they are spending. And alcoholism among the Congolese community, very big problem. Last year, November, about 1 year ago, a Congolese man killed his wife because he was alcoholic and a lot of domestic violence, and no one knew what was happening. He beat the wife to death right here in Providence, and the wife was one of our clients at the Refugee Dream Center. So one of the topics that we put a lot of time and effort on is domestic violence. We do a lot of that. So that's basically Journey to Health. It's mostly preventative health and to see how we can tackle that. And finally, we have an ESL program. That's why I was pointing to those two, notorious two. So they come in, they're amazing. They're trying to mobilize the Syrian women. And every year, a group from Brown University come to just do that to make sure Syrian women who are historically stranded at home because they cannot travel, they cannot drive, or the husbands take the car, get a job, and then they're just stuck at home. They help them with volunteers to travel, to drive them, to come to the Refugee Dream Center and help with English classes to catch up. A lot of those women now, I see now they're driving. Some of them have driver's licenses because their English is increasing, because we started that project with Brown volunteers 2 years ago, and it's doing amazingly well. So that's part of our ESL program. I see people who came the same year as me, 2007. They're now coming to attend English classes, because what happens with refugees after 6 months is you are not ready enough to get your English language skills to master them. And then you get a job at a factory. You never have a chance to continue your English classes. Or maybe when you come back from work, the institute, the main agency is closed. And then smaller agencies like us, we are not there to offer that gap-filling programs. And then they never got the chance to learn English. They're just from the factory home. Some don't even know the Providence Place Mall here. Just don't have an idea, don't even know what waterfire is. So the English classes is really just providing that kind of gap-filling. So that even no matter how long you've been here, just come and get the chance to get access to get English. Because for us, that is actually even workforce development. It's an argument for economic advancement, for people to get out of welfare system, to also get better jobs, or to get out of that underemployment or unemployment, to move up the ladder. And so generally, that's what we do. And half of our work, half of our mission is advocacy. We make a lot of noise when Trump insults refugees, or says a lot of things about refugees. Yesterday, we had some sort of a conference with Providence Journal reporters reacting to the new numbers. Last year, the government, the US government cut their numbers to 45,000. And instead of 45,000, which was still a very small number, historically smallest in the history of the US, but they did not take that number, actually. They took 20,000. So now, if they're taking 30,000, if they're giving a number 30,000, that means they are literally taking half of that. We're expecting 10,000 the next fiscal year, 10,000. That means the travel ban that we are hearing is happening. It's not only because of somebody is a Muslim or not a Muslim. It's not only a Muslim ban. It's a refugee travel ban outright. So that's what is happening. So we do a lot of advocacy around that. We join rallies or co-organize rallies at the State House. We go to Washington at the Refugee Congress and do a lot of advocacy with Congress and see how policies could be changed. Obviously, with the current political situation, a lot of people in Washington do not listen, but at least we have a lot of allies at Rhode Island level. Amazing community, amazing welcoming community, supporting refugees and making them feel at home. Yeah.
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
Sure. And just to add quickly, to our funding, we don't receive federal funding. We try not, we are qualified to it, but we try to avoid that as best as we can, because a lot of strings are attached to it. Then you become some sort of subservient to the federal government, you literally become a contractor doing their work for them. So it then alters the mission a lot. So we just use federal, local, state, and foundational funding or individual or our own fundraising efforts to just avoid, to give us the chance to really be activists, refugees helping fellow refugees. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Well, thank you both for the introductions to your organization, your lives, and your work. We really appreciate it. We're going to open it up now to questions from everybody, and I'll take the prerogative as the moderator to get it started with the first question, and so everyone else can be thinking of their question right now. So listening to both of you, one of the things that struck me is really both of your organizations exist due to a failure of government, due to a failure, in your case, of the European Union, and in your case, of the US government, to fulfill its obligations in many ways under the Refugee Convention and its obligations to the refugees that are within its borders. If you had the opportunity to rewrite policy for the EU or for the United States to deal with refugees, what are the top things that you would change in order to create an environment that was more not only welcoming, but also more supportive and in the long term better perhaps for the population of the countries as a whole?
Well, we could talk for hours regarding this question. I'm going to start with targeting the specific issue of unaccompanied minors. I mean, in my opinion, the EU-Turkey Agreement is a criminal deal. I mean, there is not, the word child does not exist in the whole text of the agreement. And the way it has been implemented, it has actually sacrificed the most vulnerable of the refugee population and the local population of the islands, who have been called to carry this analogous burden since the beginning of a refugee crisis. I came on top of a financial crisis. Now, that's, in a very macro-legal point of view. Now, more specifically, the way that EU funding is currently managed is highly problematic, because there is a big amount of money that has been earmarked for the resolution of this refugee crisis. However, that doesn't mean that it's being absorbed. And there's this paradox of how do you have this manageable number. I mean, we're not Jordan. There's a very small number, and there is earmarked EU funding. However, the funding structure operates in such a way that, for example, NGOs that do similar work with us or that are in the refugee sector, they haven't been paid for 8 or 9 months. Now, it's very hard when you're doing the work that we are doing, and you might be suffering from secondary trauma, burnout, fatigue, and then you have kids at home, not to be paid. So that's why, until now, it has been a strategic choice not to get involved with that funding structure. Now, this could change. I mean, right now, this funding is managed by a ministry that has no experience on the field. It's the Ministry of Economy and Development, and not the Ministry of Migration. So the whole scheme is set up in a way that it's really doesn't correspond to the challenges and to the issues that currently exist on the field. So we hope that that is changed, and of course that the EU assumes a more efficient role in terms of monitoring, auditing, but also in terms of restructuring and being flexible when something does not work. Now, the other thing, the big concern that we have is all the smuggling networks. What has happened with the closure of the borders, I mean, closed borders lead to an increase of the tariffs, of the smuggling tariffs. I mean, people pay all the savings of a lifetime to be smuggled illegally. Chances are that they will be caught and then returned back. So there's a huge exploitation that is being done for the most vulnerable. Now, in terms of policies, we are called to operate in a country that has been suffering for 9 years of financial crisis. So although we started to cover one gap, all of a sudden we have to cover all 10 gaps because we're operating in a country where the social welfare system has been completely collapsed. And if we don't manage to cover all 10 of them, our initial mission gets undermined. So that's very problematic. For example, if we have a medical emergency, our social workers will spend 10 or 12 hours waiting in line at the public hospital. Very often they refuse to see us. I mean, because it always depends on the public sector official and the shift of that night, whether they're racist or not racist, whether they would like to accept, refugee kids. I mean, and in horrible circumstances, we were called one time to escort two Syrian siblings from the island of Chios to Athens, and the hospital had reassured us that they would accommodate the kids who had escaped the smuggler, who had severely abused them. One of them had attempted to commit suicide. So we urgently intervened. It was not our role. That would have been the role of the state to do that. We went out of our way. We managed to get funding for airplane tickets from Aegean, which is the airline company, because we couldn't come back with the boats because the kids were being sought after by the trafficker, and the boat is the place where traffickers find the victims that have run away, because it's a 12-hour boat ride. So although the hospital had reassured us that the kids would be accommodated because they would be a threat not only to themselves but to the rest of the kids of the house, they refused. So we had to take the kids in the shelters, and this is just an example of the challenges that we face all the time. One of the two siblings, of course, needed urgently mental health support. Again, the hospital would refuse. We would go back and forth for a month and a half before they accepted to accommodate him. Right now, 5 months after, he's still in the mental health clinic. However, it's worth mentioning that there are only 10 beds in the whole of the country for the child population. So it's a very problematic situation. And we are called to operate on that gap. So there's surely, a national level, there's an EU level, but I think advocacy and raising awareness is very important, and that can be done on an international level. And I think that academic institutions can really play a very crucial role, and that's why we're very grateful to be here today, to really spread the message and give a voice to these kids. And I think giving voice to other youth. For example, we also have here two volunteers, one that is applying to Brown, one that is a senior at Brown, who have taught our kids English and who provide role models for the kids. And really, empathy comes much easier to the younger you are. Something happens when we become adults and we forget about it. I don't know how you can explain it medically, but it's very important to operate on a local level, on a national level, EU, international level, all at the same time. It's a lot of work. That's why we need support. That's why we really need, an international community of support. We need similar initiatives. We need to exchange best practices. We need to create, channels of communication at the private sector in that, because very often the private sector enables us to be much more efficient and effective and act more quickly. So, getting together and being in rooms like this are very special moments for our work.
Well, just quickly, I think when the new Refugee Act was passed in the early 80s in the US, it used to be 3 years of support for refugees. So they will get ESL for 3 years, they'll get funding, they'll get support. So in 3 years, somebody has the opportunity to be an RN, to be fluent in English, to really not be overwhelmed in addition to their past trauma, and just focus on adjusting to a new society. And remember, these are not immigrants. There are people who were not prepared to come in here. There are people who have a lot of problems already based on due to trauma and things that they've seen. So 3 years would be an ideal time so that for somebody to have support through the process and get to be self-sufficient, but also to integrate proper into American society. And it used to be that case, but then they cut it down, and now it's about 6 months, which is practically like a non-starter. It's almost impossible for someone to be self-sufficient within 6 months in the US. And I think the other thing is to be cognizant of the mental health potential of some of the policies that they're implementing. If you cut reunification, family reunification, or reduce the number of refugees coming, you are creating some sort of perpetual isolation between refugees and the people that used to be their family members. Because a lot of refugees come from collectivist cultures, meaning they have like extended family members that they live with, even if they don't live in the same apartment together, but at least in the same city or in the same country, and they can visit each other. But if you bring one person, I came here by myself, I was married for only 2 months, and my wife was literally under house arrest by the military, taking turns to make sure she doesn't leave, checking who she was talking to. For 3 years, she was in that condition. If I had come in this current period, she would not join me. So imagine how useful would I be to American society. I would probably just be a liability, sitting at home getting depressed and not working and not going to school or just not doing anything, because it will be very isolated. And that's the reality of people right now. So I think increasing the number of people coming and also encouraging family reunification. We are very cognizant and very sensitive to the fact that the US obviously cannot open its border for the whole world to come. We understand that. But you see, 1% of people to be resettled, and you are not taking even all that 1%, you are just taking a fraction of that. It doesn't make any difference to the socioeconomic makeup of the US. It just makes us better as global leaders in humanitarian intervention and support and compassionate people. And then actually some of the wars that create displacement, we are involved. In Iraq, for example, or Afghanistan, we are involved one way or the other, so we participate. And even Syria, one way, impliedly, as a global leader, if we could probably intervene in some way, or even by taking some refugees, it's impliedly showing that kind of global leadership. But just the most important part of the policy that could be implemented is amping their efforts outside to make sure that the things that are generating the refugees stop. We are not policing the world, but as a global leader and the global superpower, the US has leverage to really stop some of these things happening. If you see a dictator slaughtering his people, and then like Rwanda, and you wait until 1 million people are killed 3 months later, what is the point? And then you are now struggling of taking all that 1 million refugees to the US. You cannot. You're just going to take a fraction of that, and then we're going to have these battles of moral decisions of who to take and who not to take, and then what to do about it. But we could have done a preventative measure. You see a dictator help like what they did in Panama, Noriega and others. You know, you can help stop some sort of conflicts happening. Syria, if the US was really, from a foreign policy perspective, if they are very serious about helping to end what is happening, they could have done that at an early stage. And then we will not be having more than 5 million refugees, struggling, millions more internally displaced, and then everybody in the brink of starvation or dying. So they could have done something about that. So I think the US, in conjunction with other global leaders, could really do a lot to stop what is causing refugees. For me, I think the preventative method could be a good action method. And I think then finally, in the camps, it already is happening. You're talking about 22 million in different camps or in different locations. Amplify the efforts that are happening there and continue to help people, to support them. And then closer to home, as I started with, increase the support, to just be realistic that if someone is coming to a new country that you are not prepared for, 6 months is practically impossible. Even an immigrant who planned for their city, for that journey, 3 months to 6 months is not enough for them to adjust. It has to be at least 3 years for somebody to adjust and to be more self-sufficient and to be able to contribute better to the American society.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an important point you raise, that a number of refugees that the US and Europe and all these third-party countries takes is a mere fraction of the total number of refugees in the world. And we spend so much of our time in the US and Europe complaining about this tiny number of refugees that we actually are taking. Meanwhile, I was on Monday at the UN General Assembly and heard President Duque from Colombia talking they've taken 1.6 million refugees from Venezuela in the last year, and nobody's talking about it, and yet they are managing it. So I think it's really important to reset a lot of the discussion and the paradigm when we talk about refugees, to understand really what a small piece of it we're doing and how it's not actually that big a deal in the context of what we're talking about. All right, so I want to open it up to everyone in the audience. We have a microphone that Seth, by the way, Seth Stulina, our fantastic program manager at HI Squared, everybody who helped make this event and all of our events happen. So, questions?
Do we have
Over here.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Lauren, and I'm really interested in volunteering and helping out with your movement. Please excuse my voice, I am slightly, I'm getting better, but I'm slightly sick. So how do you explain to people who are experiencing xenophobia, like how do you explain like the refugees aren't here to hurt you or poorly impact your lives, but how do you do it in a way that hasn't been said, because we're saying it over and over and over again, and clearly it's not making a difference. So what are some new ways in which you'd explain to them, like, they're here because they're trying to seize the opportunity to improve their lives and the lives of their family? Like,
Well,
Sure. You want me to go first? Or?
well, I mean, I think some of it is really not hate, it's just ignorance. We have to voice out, just really bridge the gap, the difference between refugees or just immigrant communities in general and the American community. A lot of people know a lot, but there's a small fraction who have no idea. Who, the only message they get and know about refugees is what they hear Trump saying on TV. And what do they hear on TV? Terrorists coming to depend on our welfare system and then making it look like these are less than human. They're actually not even qualified. They're not good enough to even enter our country. So if you dehumanize or minimize somebody to that level, and by the way, even in Rhode Island here, on amazing, strangely, a very welcoming state, a state lawmaker 2 years ago made a pronouncement that when refugees from Syria come, let's create a camp for them, a concentration camp somewhere so that they are not mixed with the community because they could be terrorists. Because he was in Rhode Island right here. A lawmaker said that. Can you imagine? Rhode Island, of all places, we have notoriety of being one of the most welcoming states in America. Imagine if someone out of the lot can say something like that. What do you expect is happening in some of the most conservative states? Some people are just ignorant, they don't know. Imagine, we were offended as a Muslim. A lot of my Jewish friends were very offended. What do you expect? They will be very offended because their grandparents went through concentration camps. And then you are saying that while they're just behind in their backyard. So those are the kind of things happening. I think we just need to increase the dialogue, conversation, to understand that the people you are thinking they are terrorists, actually they are victims of terrorists. They are survivors of terrorist acts. And also, it's not only about these Muslims, refugees are everybody. Even if you hate Muslims, you may not know, I have a lot of encounters with people. I'm not the obvious Muslim. If I don't tell anybody I'm a Muslim, they will not know. A lot of people encounter me and say a lot of things because they may think, oh, this man may side with us and against the Muslim refugees. No, I'm a Muslim, by the way. You don't know. So I think it's just ignorance, people not knowing. So refugee is not Muslim. Refugee is not Middle Eastern. Refugee is everybody who is displaced or forced to leave their country. That's basically what a refugee is. And then during the 1980s, the Southeast Asians who were coming. It's just waves of when the conflict happens. Before that, it was the Jewish refugees. And these kinds of bigotry happened. Some Jewish ships were sent back home. And then the people sent back home from New York ended up in concentration camps. Some were killed. We could have saved them. It happened to the Jewish community. The Southeast Asian camps, the monks were among the most vilified because of the cultural difference. And then the Liberians came in the 1980s, in the 1990s and early 200s. They did very well. They adjusted. Actually, this Rhode Island has the biggest number of Liberians in America, about 15,000. And then now it's us, the smaller countries that you cannot see on the map, and then the bigger ones like the current conflicts like Syria, Iraq, and Congo, and other places. But I think the moment we put a humanitarian touch, a human touch to it, people will understand. Because I don't think there's any human being who wants to look at a woman who is a victim or survivor of rape and not want to help them, especially when they're already here. All you need is just to show them that they're human beings. In Congo and South Sudan, actually rape is used as currency, not beyond weapon of war, currency. Because they fought to a level that in some parts of the country, especially South Sudan, and even Amnesty International and international organizations do reports on this, to a level that they don't see paper currency like this. They don't see it like the US dollar. When you go to the store, what you use, they don't see it. So what the generals use when they attack a village, they either force the men to fight or kill them, and they use the women, give them to their soldiers to rape. And that's the payment, that's the salary. It's currency, it's beyond punishment, it's currency. This is our money, this is my salary for you, for fighting for me. If one or two of them, or let's say less than 1% of those end up in the US, what can we do just to give them, to help them, to literally help and be human and support them? Nobody was forced to leave their home. No one was prepared. And the US is doing it not because the UN is forcing them to do it or because another country is forcing them to do it. It's just because this is part of the US history and part of our country makeup as humanitarian people, have people who support. And it's 300 million people or more. If you just have less than 1% of people of refugees coming, it's nothing. It doesn't make any difference. Actually, it just adds to the diversity and just the country in general. It's just help. Yeah.
Should I also answer? Do you want me to answer?
Sure, if you like.
One of the priorities of our work since the beginning was community building, and we had to do that to fight specifically xenophobia, racism and violent local reactions. I mean, there's an extreme right-wing party that is right now the third most popular party in Greece called Golden Dawn. And they are very vocal against all foreigners and refugees. And they're very active in central Athens, sometimes very near the areas where we are operating. So we really have to do community building bottom up every single day. And the most efficient way we've found until now is through what Omar said, to humanize the experience. So I'm going to give you an example. There was a neighbor in one of our shelters. She was a typical 65-year-old retiree living with her 45-year-old unemployed son. The typical profile of a Golden Dawn voter and supporter, because this woman was desperate after 9 years of financial crisis. Her pension was cut 75%. Her husband had died. Her son was unemployed. So she was really the ideal victim for Golden Dawn, who has been doing a lot of community work, bottom up, escorting her to the supermarket, brainwashing her about all the refugees and the foreigners who are destroying the areas. So one day she had an outbreak against us, saying that we're hosting ISIS supporters and ISIS soldiers and all that. So what we did is during our Christmas party, we opened the doors to her and her son, and we invited her in to eat with us, and then we started introducing her to the kids. And then she was like, "You never told me that they are kids. No one ever said that they are kids. No one ever told me what is happening." And since then, she has been cooking for us. So it really, we really have to take one by one. We're not always going to have that reaction. Let's be honest. But I always use what one of our kids has written in a storytelling workshop that they did. I mean, she wrote that. She's actually the girl that we have from Gambia. Wow. That, in the beginning I was very sad when I was seeing racist people. Now I'm not sad anymore because I know it's out of fear. So if we tackle that, and if we explain and we talk about it, then we have higher chances of passing the message through.
Other questions? Over here.
I'll just say it. What kind of mental health interventions are your organizations allowed to do? And like, what do you actually, like, if anything, do you implement with the people that you work with?
So in the beginning, we had psychological support that was not, you know, adequate and enough for us to deal with the increasingly deteriorating conditions. So right now, very often we face kids that we have kids that have attempted to commit suicide. They suffer from anxiety, depression, PTSD that is not PTSD. It's a a continuously traumatic state. So, so what we have done is we have psychologists and psychotherapists in every shelter, in every home. We have child psychiatrists and trauma specialists, art therapy, occupational therapy, play therapy, music. I mean, all the involvement of the arts in therapeutic ways. And what we've recently done is we've restructured our operations and we've done a child protection unit. So we're trying to integrate the mental health aspect in everything that we do. In our education programs, in our social work, in our legal support, it really has to be integrated in everything that we do. And all that ends up in an individual psychopedagogical plans for each kid. Because really, even if you're doing your asylum interview, as you said, you know, trauma can come up and that can ruin the whole asylum interview, or the same thing for family reunification. So it's very important to integrate mental health in all of our programs. And of course, for us, what has really changed the atmosphere is the self-care and the weekly supervisions that we provide for all of our staff, because this is what is going to make our operations sustainable. They have to be supported in order to continue to support, especially because these are people who are doing this with their souls, you know, so it's very easy to burn out. So they really need to be supported as well.
Great. So, yeah, so similar to us, we utilize mental health through our Journey to Health program that I mentioned earlier on. So it's a journey, as we stated. So we have a specific session on mental health coping skills. So it's a group on Saturdays, and we talk specifically how people can, you know, get coping tools, to use tools, you know, breathing, you know, culturally appropriate ways to deal with trauma. And then we also work with a lot of interns from Johnson & Wales who are psychology interns, and we do assessments and refer them to where better places where they can have extended services and other places. So we collaborate with those clinicians. But currently, we still do the assessments. The problem with Rhode Island, we are always like playing catch up. In Massachusetts, they have a better process for refugees. Actually, they have a law that the moment a refugee enters the state, within 90 days, they have to get a mental health assessment. That is not the case in Rhode Island. So a lot of the clients that end up with us 6 months after their arrival have never been assessed. So we use a tool, very simple tool called Refugee Health Screener 15, RHS 15. It's 15 because it's just 15 questions, very short, and it assesses the mental health status of the person. And it has some items that deal with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And once we have that, you know, when they have 12 and up in the score, that is positive, and that means we can have them join the group, or we can refer them to specialized services. And all of us, me and the interns, we go to supervision every Monday at Quality Behavioral Health, which is a mental health clinic, a hospital, some psychiatric hospital in Warwick, Rhode Island. So we go there and, you know, get more skills that we can use at the center. But we just, you know, as Sophia said, we integrated in almost everything apart from the health program, we also integrated in the youth program, and in a positive manner, so that people can just continue to just get out of that traumatic situation. And when trauma happens, in most cases, you'll see two things will be very glaring, like isolation or extreme propensity to be angry, or like short-tempered, because just you're overstuffed. You're not able to deal with a lot of stuff. So, you know, in the youth program, just creating music, poetry. And by the way, we have a lot of poets now because people use that as a way of, you know, expressing themselves. You know, we have a rap group, you know, two kids from Burma, former Myanmar, Burma, and one from Congo. So they have an ARF group. They use music to express themselves. Now they go to places to play and perform. So just are the kind of things that we used in the youth program, but more formally in the health program through assessments and referrals. Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, wow, lots of questions now. All right, let's go over here first, and then we'll go there second.
It's for our online viewers, so we can answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you all for this wonderful presentation. I just have some quick questions. Omar, I was wondering if you know to what extent post-refugee resettlement programs exist in the U.S. So for me, this is the first time I'm hearing that there is this program. And just to piggyback off that question, because you see people after they've already gone through their time with resettlement officers, what do you think resettlement agencies can do as soon as people come to the U.S. that maybe you guys pick up on, maybe something that can be expanded across the nation as a post-resettlement organization? Something that occurred to me was this, 15 questions and this assessment of trauma. And then, Sophia, the question I had for you was, do you feel like Greece is in competition for financial support with other countries like Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey that are that now the EU and other countries in the West have shifted to in order to contain the refugee populations in the global South? I've often wondered, how these countries that were the first to receive the asylum seekers in 2015, 2016 are now in competition with the major refugee host countries in the global South. Thank you.
So just quickly, I think the resettlement agencies are very overwhelmed themselves because they are operating on a very stringent budget. Imagine 2,600 for refugee, and that supports their case management staff and the refugee themselves. In most cases, they get notification 1 week before the arrival of a refugee family. And that means they have to struggle to get the furniture, the apartment rent, clean it and prepare everything within 1 week. So it's just always a hassle, always running. However, they can still do basic stuff, as you stated, doing those assessments like Massachusetts does. And it's very simple. At least you know where the status of this person is in terms of their mental health status, and then help refer them or do counseling at the site. Because you never know, somebody could be suicidal or just could be dealing with very difficult situation. They could also support community leaders, refugee leaders, and then empower them to do exactly what we are doing or similar in other ways. I know that there are some resettlement agencies that train and support interpreters, or they call them cultural brokers because they want them to be seen as colleagues, which is really true. They are colleagues because they have expertise in a very transcultural approach in most ways that providers in whether it's healthcare or education do not understand. They need them as cultural brokers, meaning they are just not only interpreting English, they are doing more than that. They are explaining the culture. They are doing community health work. They are going to the homes, helping them with their prescriptions, helping them with their children's needs in schools and everything, conflicts, domestic violence. They are doing much more than interpreting. So it's a profession. So they can empower that and have them strewn around the community and maybe train some in each ethnic community. And then one of the mistakes that many people do also, refugees are like the American society, not homogeneous, the people from all parts of the world. Even those from the same country have very different cultures sometimes. For instance, you may have 2 refugees from Iraq and Syria, and if you do not know the cultures and refer them to the same mosque, sorry, Iraq, just actually from Iraq alone, so one may be Shiite, one may be Sunni. There may be certain ways they don't celebrate certain holidays, or maybe they may not even want to worship in the same mosque. Like the one Yamul Ashura that just passed last week. Maybe the Shiite celebrates it more than the Sunni because of the cultural variations. So my point is, even people from the same culture are not as unique as people may think. So every person, based on their story or their culture, are unique in their own way. So basically just helping people to empower them and knowing that the resettlement agency cannot really do everything. And then what others may be doing to help fill the gaps is not a duplication of what they're doing. It's literally helping to extend or actually even complement what they're doing. It's not like mixing what is, they're going in parallel with each other, so that what you cannot do, somebody will pick up and continue. If they see it like that, it will be much, much easier. We were doing exactly what is happening in other states. At the Refugee Congress, is one refugee from each state representing their state in DC. When we meet there, 50 of us, all of them are like me, or what I was doing before. They are just advocates in the community, or having an advocacy organization, doing activism and community organizing, or working with the resettlement agencies. At some point, after 4 years ago, 6 years after my arrival, I said, no, I have to move to the next level. I want to really do exactly like the resettlement agencies, but at a different time of the resettlement continuum. So hopefully we can learn from each other. They can also establish those models in partnership with resettlement agencies. I have a great relationship with the resettlement agencies. There are only 2 in Rhode Island. Unfortunately, the diocese, probably because of the current policies, the Catholic diocese is closing. They still have a case management program, but they are closing. They are not taking refugees anymore. Docas International Institute is the only one here. We have a great relationship. Sometimes we even co-apply grants together, things that they know we are complementing, or we are doing that they cannot do. Then we apply grants together and we share the funds, and even sometimes personnel for them to empower our resources that we may not have as a bigger agency. As I said, we are just 6 staff. That's the only thing we can pay. The rest of the work is done by volunteers, interns, visitors, or everybody else. You see, it's probably the work of 20 people, but only 6 staff that we have. Very small organization, but that's how intentionally we are designed, so that we can just focus on gap filling. And my hope is really other states can have at least one person to be able to do that in those places. Because if not, refugees will just found an organization and they'll be just in the streets organizing, which is amazing. And that's what I was doing for 6-7 years. But then I think there should be some sort of graduation to the next level to be able to really do something tangible at a station place. Yeah.
So to answer your question, I don't think Greece is in competition. I mean, there is available EU funding. There are funds on an EU level. However, they're not being absorbed, because the design of the funding mechanism is not efficient. Also, I don't think countries should be in competition between them to get funding for the refugee crisis, although sometimes it's the case, and people, especially institutions and organizations that do this for business, they view it in that way. I think because this is, a human issue, it's very locally specific, and the programs have always to be designed taking into consideration the local specificity, the geographical specificities, the nationalities of the refugees that we're dealing with. It's what Omar said. Not all refugees are the same. I mean, a refugee is a person in seek of a refuge. It doesn't mean anything else. So it's very important to take that into consideration whenever we design programs, when we implement interventions, and when we go and fundraise about our work.
So I think we had one over here, so will be our last question. I'll just say before we finish as well that anybody who's interested to learn more about our Humanitarian Innovation Initiative, if you're not already on our listserv, please sign up on the piece of paper outside, and we'll add you to the listserv. You can hear about our events and activities coming up. You can also look for us on the web, watson.brown.edu/hi2, and hear more about our work. We'll also have information. In fact, we've been advertising the Refugee Dream Center, which is advertising for interns right now as well, and we'll get information about the Home Project as well in case people are interested in interning or working with these organizations. So our last question here.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and this conversation feels very personal to me as well. As when my mother was 10 years old, she came as a refugee from Saigon in 1975, and as you had mentioned about since you guys are both, well-versed in trauma, like I was reading an article, I think from 2015, citing statistics that Vietnamese refugees had a high percentage of xenophobia towards Syrian refugees. And so I was wondering if you could talk about, in which ways you can promote conversations about trauma and solidarity in the refugee community.
I think the program that we both did, I mean, the Harvard program on refugee trauma is something that an academic institution did, recognizing this problem. And also, you know, mental health and trauma is a very, very general, I mean, it's a very general term. It has a lot of, you know, categories and issues that have to be discussed, and you know, we could talk about it for, I mean, it was a 9-month course, and still it was not even the beginning, but it's very important to recognize that it exists. I mean, I remember learning that, you know, refugee trauma can be passed on to 3 generations. And that is also important to recognize, because issues can come up, challenges can come up, and there should always be a support system around that. So, you know, definitely these support systems should be created around different communities on a small scale or a bigger scale, and then more conversations around it, and, you know, programs around it, academic programs around it, I think are issues and things that can help.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, the solidarity part, I mean, obviously it's very important to encourage ethnic communities to have their own groupings, because that helps them to keep their culture, but also to support each other at community level. But also at macro level, it's really important to create that kind of combination, like collective effort, for the community to come together, refugees to see themselves as refugees, but in that effort to integrate into American society, but also to be in solidarity with each other. So that we are not saying Congolese, Syrians, Bhutanese, we are all one, we are all refugees. Because sometimes, as I stated earlier on, sometimes my identity mistakes people. Some people come in here, there was somebody who came to my office and said, oh, I was looking for the African Dream Center, because Omar is black and is from Africa. No. Is the Refugee Dream Center is for everybody. There are Syrian refugees, as I said, there's a group of students that just work with Syrian women to bring them there. There are Somali refugees, there are people from Burma, Bhutan, everywhere, and in Africa from all over the world, mostly Congolese and Somali. So basically the point is, it's not because Omar is a Muslim, it's only Syrian refugees and Somali. It's not because only Omar is an African, it's only African refugees, it's everybody. I think if we encourage that, then we'll not have one generation later, and then we'll have somebody from Vietnam joining the conservative movement saying Syrian refugees are terrorists, they should not come here. I think the lack of that kind of collaboration, people get detached from their own reality. And some people become in another generation and get confused and forget very easily, because people, that's why at the Refugee Dream Center we banned this term. Assimilation, we don't use it. Personally, I go to all our documents on the drive. Sometimes people say, Omar, what are you doing? I say, no, I'm busy. I look at all the documents. If that word comes, I just delete it and replace it with integrate or similar terms. Because the moment you say assimilation, personally, I think it is a word that has the tendency to have somebody minimize their culture or be afraid to keep their identity. And the US, it is not their intention to have some people come in here and completely wipe out their culture or identity. No. They want you to offer something to the country, cultural diversity. But you cannot also be stuck on your own culture. So you come in, you meet in the middle, like we're doing with the youth. You offer something, they offer something, you meet in the middle, so balance it. Take some of American culture, and then keep some of your culture. And so that way you can integrate, but you are not also lost in who you are as an identity. I don't think you'll self-hate to the extent of hating others. I have 2 kids who were born here, they're 6 and 8 years old. They speak my language fluently, because that's what we speak at home. We make sure they keep that identity. So they speak it perfectly. On weekends, they go to the Quranic school at the masjid. They speak Arabic, they write Arabic very well. So 6 and 8 years, they speak 3 languages already, fuller Arabic and English, fluently. And they write 2, because my language, there's no writing, there's no alphabet. It's only spoken. But just coming back to it again, that solidarity is really what we can encourage. If people are encouraged to have their self-esteem, be who they are, and then just embrace some of American culture, not everything, not assimilate, integrate, meaning you balance both. You know, just take some and some. You'll see that when the kids come in, they assimilate instead of integrating, and they start having that generational problems with their parents. they just have a lot of problems because of the difference in integration process. And I think that's how even that Harvard program started in the late 70s and early 80s. This young Dr. Molika was working at a hospital in Boston. And then no one knew what refugees are, especially Southeast Asian refugees. People were treating them badly, especially providers. He himself didn't have an idea. He was just from Yale. He moved to Harvard recently at that time. And he decided to work with a young social worker who knew more about the refugees, Jim Levine, and they started working together. He learned a lot about the Southeast Asians, especially the Cambodians. His expertise is really on Cambodians. And I think whatever he learned there, you can apply it in most refugee communities, because that teaches his main doctrine, which is the trauma story, meaning the refugee is the teacher. You have 4 steps. When you meet with the refugee, as a provider, whether you're a teacher, social worker, doctor, whoever you are, just see them as a human being, don't objectify them. And then listen, let them build a relationship first. That must be done so that there's trust, and then they start telling you the story. Then when they tell you the story, they are the teacher. You are just a listener. He's not calling you even a doctor or anything, just a listener. And they are the teacher. And eventually you start looking behind the curtain. There may be a general from Cambodia who doesn't want to clean at the mall as a job. They want to just do something to their stature. So you may not understand, so look behind the curtain. Just look at the cultural meaning of events. So that way people will start helping people in a more appropriate manner. And then they have feelings. They may not say anything, but they have feelings too. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let's thank both our panelists, Omar and Sophia.